Greetings, War Thunderers. This is Longshot with another entry in the series I call Analyze This. Usually these videos feature replays sent to me by viewers, but this one's a bit different. A player going by the name of Undeceived posted this replay on the official forums, asking for people to give him feedback on what he could have done better in this battle. Now, he could have posted replays of his good games where he got lots of kills, but no, he put this one up because he wanted help in overcoming any mistakes or bad habits that might be holding him back. And things do not go well for him in this game, and games like these are excellent opportunities to learn and improve. In other words, he exactly described the purpose of my Analyze This videos. In fact, he even titled his post, Analyze This. And my hope is that in looking at this replay, I can not only help Undeceived, but also anyone else who watches this video. Now, if you haven't guessed already, this is a realistic battle and he's flying a Bf 109 G6. Like many players, he's climbing at an angle, in this case 15 degrees, for his long slog up to altitude, rather than using the indicative airspeed of the plane, which is far more efficient for sustained climbing. In this case, it meant he was travelling at 340 km an hour for much of the climb, and that's quite fast. With a G-series Bf 109, the best climb rate can be achieved at around 280 km an hour in both RB and arcade as well for that matter. But there isn't really a huge drop-off in climbing performance in RB if you fly faster than that. It took Undeceived about 220 seconds from takeoff up to 4,000 metres. And at 280 km an hour, its best climb speed, he'd have gotten there at about 10 seconds earlier, and that's not a lot. However, by travelling at such a high speed, he's going to come into contact with the enemy a bit sooner than he needed to, before he'd gained enough altitude, so climbing at a slower speed would have gained him more time to ensure an altitude advantage, and that's what this plane needs if it's going to fight the likes of P-38s and Spitfires. As the rest of his team haven't bothered climbing at all, he wisely decided to turn away and continue to gain altitude. But as he does so, he's still climbing at that angle of 15 degrees, and that works well up to around 5,000 metres, but above that the engine power starts to progressively fall away, and the plane can't sustain its speed at that angle, and it begins to slow down. Here he is approaching 7,000 metres, and now he's down to 240 km an hour and falling. So effectively by climbing at an angle, he has capped his altitude at 7,000 metres, and there was no need for that. He's now way below the ideal climbing airspeed, and that's dangerous. He's not climbing as quickly as he could, and if the enemy find him, they'll have no problem running him down. And the enemy are definitely going to be looking for him. He's the only fighter left on his team, and I don't expect his teammates at low altitude to last very long at all. So let's watch and see how this unfolds. He's pretty much out of options here. You can't see it here, but the Spitfire is about 6 kilometres away and closing. I'm pretty sure he would have had visuals on the Spitfire, which is why he's turning in. And it's not only the Spitfire, the Lightning is also chasing him down at this point. Very soon we're going to see the Spitfire. There he is. He's not only closing in at a vast rate of knots, he also has an altitude advantage. So, and I'll just pause it there. Straight away he's fighting at a handicap, and this makes it hard. If you haven't been able to gain an energy or altitude or both advantage over a Spitfire in a 109, you've got problems. You can't hang with a Spitfire in a dogfight. It will outturn a 109 every day of the week. Neither can you outroll the Spitfire necessarily up at this battle rating range. The Spitfire roll rate has generally improved by the time you get to the high-level Spit. So what advantages does the 109 have over a Spitfire? I struggle to find it, unless you have that energy advantage, which he doesn't have. So I'll move it along. As you can see, he's putting the plane down into a bit of a dive to gain some more speed. But one thing I notice here is he doesn't keep eyes on the Spitfire. I mean, this is his camera work, not mine. He's looking all around, but not at the Spit. And by the way, he's flying directly towards a dot, which you may or may not be able to see, and it's the P-38. There he is. So I don't know where the Spitfire is. He doesn't appear on the overhead map. Oh, there he is, only a kilometre behind and closing, so he has to increase the angle of his dive. So it looks like he's going to be forced to go defensive straight away. But then he takes a rather ambitious attempt here to take a shot at the Lightning. Wasn't successful, but that was a huge risk. And I'll pause it there because the Spitfire is now almost within firing range. I mean, lifting up for that shot at the Lightning has cost Undeceived 109 a lot of speed. and the Spitfire is now a huge danger to him and he's going to have to dive out hard. Now I suppose in taking that gamble for that shot, if he managed to actually shoot the Lightning down, then it would be on a one-on-one instead of a 2 versus 1. So maybe it was worth the risk if he thought the gap to the Spitfire was large enough to take the chance. So I'm not going to criticise him too much for that. I mean, he's in a difficult situation right at the outset here. Now, can he outdive the Spitfire? That's the question. He's gaining a little bit of distance on it, and looks like the P-38's taken a wrong turn back there. He's gotten left way behind, so for the moment it is down to a 1 versus 1. But the question is whether Undeceived can get away and get separation from that Spitfire, which he really needs to do, desperately needs to do. But so far it's just not happening. Spits can dive at quite a high speed. 109s cannot dive away from them. The Spitfire player's being a little bit clever here. He doesn't want to get so fast that he's at risk of snapping his wings off, so he lifted up to get above. And again, Undeceived is performing a bit of a turn there without having eyes on the Spitfire when he was doing it. And if the Spit had dived to attack at that point, he would have had an easy shot, I think. But as it is, he's trying desperately to get a shot at the Spit. And I assume at this point the Lightning's just too far away. And that's lucky for Undeceived because he stalled his plane. And it's also fortunate for him that the Spitfire was not in a position to hammerhead over and attack at that point. So he's taking some huge risks going for some ambitious shots. And there's going to be a point at which he can no longer do that. And here's the Lightning arriving late for the party and overshooting. So back into the dive we go. And now he only has about 2,000 metres of altitude to play with. And those planes are not going to let him get away. And very soon he's going to be out of options. He's going to have to dogfight, and it's going to be pretty tough. Spitfire is just not diving that hard. He's preferring to stay above him about 1 kilometre and wait for the 109 to make a move. And then the Spitfire will attack. Okay, so where are they? Still no attack yet. If I was in the 109, I'd just try and run for my airfield if I could, but I think he saw the Spitfire diving in, looking at the overhead map, so he's pulled a hard brake, which has cost him a lot of speed. And now another hard brake to try and catch the Spitfire as he extends up in a zoom climb. And again, this is really, really ambitious. And the Spitfire is now baiting him for the Lightning. And the Lightning is going to come in a couple of seconds and finish off the 109, which is a very easy target. Now, I mean, he was really up against it in that situation. Up against 2 planes, both of which held the altitude and energy advantage of him and which could take turns to bait and attack him. The question is what he could have done better. Now, I hate to say this, but I think he could have done better by getting some practice in arcade, which would have greatly helped his situational awareness skills and his camera work, and may have helped his judgment as to when to attack him and also to avoid stalling out his plane in the way he did twice there, trying for shots at targets which set himself up if any other interceptor was coming in. Alright, so now we're looking at the Spitfire, and this is back to the initial stages where he met up with the 109. You can see the Spitfire was climbing also at a very steep angle and ridiculously low speed. He too maybe needs to learn the benefits of climbing at an indicative airspeed rather than an angle. So here's the Spitfire swooping down on the 109 as the 109 approaches the P-38. 109 goes into a steeper dive to get the Spitfire away from him and then lifts up into the climb at the P-38. P-38 tries for a head-on, then dodges away. Spitfire's trying to get close. Can't quite do it, and then into the dive we go. And he's taking some long-range pot shots there, with his cannon as well. I would have expected just machine guns. Yeah, you don't have that many cannon shells to waste. But I guess he's trying to get the 109 to start dancing and dodging, which will force him into a dogfight, rather than letting him just continue to dive. So the Spitfire's airspeed is now in the red, and he's gently lifted up and levelled his plane out to avoid building up too much speed, thereby nullifying the risk of a wing snap. And there goes the 109 pulling a hard turn, trying to lift up to get a shot. The Spitfire responds by going into a bit of a climbing spiral here. Up he goes. which is great if there was someone else to drop down and take out the 109 when he stalls, which he does now. The Spitfire could possibly have got a shot here if he ruddered and elevated over a bit earlier, but he's a bit slow to spot it. And so by the time he does so, the 109's regained some speed, he's back in a dive and he's running away, and there comes the P-38. Alright, so into the second phase. Okay, the 109 is now down on the deck. He's completely out of options, and the Spitfire is starting to gently lower his altitude to close in and engage. Spitfire is managing his speed quite well here. He obviously is well versed in how not to lose your wings on this plane by turning too sharply or getting too fast. And the 109 senses him getting a bit close, so he pulls the hard horizontal brake. Spitfire tries for a shot, doesn't connect, then lifts up to again maintain his altitude advantage, and looks like he's going to try and bait the 109 with another climbing spiral. 109's trying to get guns on him, just can't do it. And in will come the P-38. So what could the 109 have done better there as I look at it from the P-38's point of view? Well, what I didn't like about... Now, sure, he was forced to dogfight. There's no doubt about that, and he was always on a hiding to nothing in that situation. There was no way he could have outfought these planes in a dogfight. But nevertheless, by pulling sharp horizontal turns, that bled away whatever speed he has. And in a 109, you've really got to be concentrating on your speed and maintaining that speed as high as you possibly can, especially in one of the higher level 109s. You can't be just pulling wasteful turns that bleed that speed away when you're not going to get it back, especially when you're at an altitude disadvantage. Would have been better for him to let the Spitfire get a bit closer and then try some rolling evasion manoeuvres, trying to force an overshoot. Maybe the kind of thing that Messerschmitt shows in a lot of his videos. That might have worked a bit better than trying to pull a hard brake, which sure, it saved him from one or two attacks, but left him even more helpless afterwards. And then to follow it up with a very ambitious attempt to climb after the plane as it zooms off after pulling two hard turns, it was never going to work. And the other thing too is he didn't once look at this P-38. He was just focused purely on the Spitfire, and that's tunnel vision. Again, that's why I suggest he could benefit a lot from going back and playing in some arcade, just to get some better situational awareness, where it is so essential in arcade. You gain that and you bring that to RB, you won't be in this situation where you'll be caught as easy fodder for someone else that you didn't even look at and didn't see coming. Well, I hope this video has proved helpful to Undeceived and to everyone else who watches. I've got a couple of other Analyze This videos lined up. Please don't be sending me replays unless you have something absolutely brilliant. But anyway, until my next video, take care everyone and good hunting, and I'll be seeing you in the skies.